On July 13, 2024, former President Trump was grazed by a bullet during a rally in Butler County, Pennsylvania. The shooter, Thomas Matthew Crooks, was quickly subdued, and the FBI's advanced technology was used to break into his phone. But how they accessed his phone is really concerning. Let's talk about how they hacked the Trump shooter's phone and why it matters to every single one of us. Researchers, using some seriously questionable methods, managed to piece together the movements of Thomas Matthew Crooks' phone in the days leading up to the assassination attempt. You might be thinking, sure, the FBI probably got a warrant and tracked his phone, but this wasn't the FBI or any law enforcement. These were private researchers using data that's frighteningly easy to obtain. According to the Oversight Project, a part of the conservative think tank Heritage Foundation, Crooks' phone made 2 trips to the city where the now infamous rally was held. But that's not all. They claim he visited a gun shop and even a building in Washington, D.C. near an FBI office. Conspiracy theorists are having a field day with this last bit, but let's focus on the real issue here. How on earth did they get this information? Using a controversial method known as mobile ad data tracking, the Oversight Project managed to piece together Crooks' movements in the days leading up to the assassination attempt. But how exactly did they do it? And more importantly, what does this mean for your privacy? To understand the gravity of this situation, we need to take a step back and look at the world of mobile advertising. Every day, millions of us use our apps on smartphones without a second thought. We check the weather, play games, scroll through social media, all seemingly innocent activities. But behind the scenes, many of these apps are doing more than just providing a service. They're collecting data, lots of it. One of the most valuable pieces of information these apps gather is your location. GPS coordinates, to be precise. This data is then sold to third-party companies, creating a detailed map of your movements. The companies claim this is to serve you with more relevant ads, but as we're about to see, in the wrong hands, this information can be used for much more than deciding which products to show you. The researchers at the Oversight Project tapped into this vast ocean of data. They identified devices that regularly visited both Crooks' home and place of work. By focusing on these devices, they were able to trace the movements of what they believed to be Crooks' phone. According to their analysis, Crooks had made 2 trips to Butler County before the day of the rally. He had visited a gun shop, and perhaps most intriguingly, he had been in the vicinity of an FBI office in Washington, D.C. Now, it's important to note that this method isn't foolproof. The researchers claim to have tracked at least 9 devices linked to these ad IDs. Even though we know Crooks only owned 2 phones, this discrepancy raises questions about the accuracy of their findings. However, the implications of this technique are staggering. Think about it. Your movements, your habits, the places you visit, all of this information is potentially up for grabs, hidden in the vast databases of advertising companies. You might be thinking, but wait, isn't this data supposed to be anonymous? And you'd be right to ask that question. The companies behind this data collection claim that everything is anonymized, with each user's information linked only to an ad ID rather than a name or a phone number. However, de-anonymizing this data is often frighteningly easy. Think about your daily routine. You probably visit your home and workplace more than any other locations, right? Well, if someone knows where you live and work, they can likely identify your anonymous data with a high degree of accuracy. And from there, they can see everywhere else you've been. While researchers were piecing together Crooks' movements using ad data, law enforcement was facing a different challenge: cracking into his actual phone. When the FBI first got their hands on Crooks' phone, they hit a wall. The device was locked, and not just with a simple passcode. The phone, reportedly a newer Samsung model running Android, proved too tough for their initial attempts to crack. Smartphones manufacturers have been beefing up their security measures for years, partly in response to user demands for privacy and partly to stay ahead of both criminals and overzealous law enforcement. But the FBI wasn't about to let a locked phone stand in the way of their investigation. They needed to know if Crooks had acted alone, if he had been in contact with any co-conspirators, or if there was any evidence that might point to his motives. So they did what any resourceful law enforcement agency would do. They called in the big guns. The phone was shipped off to the FBI's lab in Quantico, Virginia, a state-of-the-art facility where some of the world's best digital forensics experts worked to crack the toughest cases. But even with all their expertise and advanced tools, they couldn't immediately break into Crook's phone. Unable to crack the phone themselves, the FBI turned to an Israeli company called Cellebrite. If you haven't heard of Cellebrite before, you're not alone. They operate in a realm that most of us never see, developing tools that can bypass the security features of smartphones. Cellebrite is just one player in a growing digital forensics firm industry. These companies walk a fine line between helping law enforcement solve crimes and potentially enabling invasions of privacy. Their tools are capable of extracting data from locked phones, recovering deleted messages, and piecing together digital evidence that most users think is long gone. In this case, Cellebrite came through for the FBI. They provided the Bureau with an unreleased version of their software, a hacking tool so new that it wasn't even on the market yet. And it worked. In just 40 minutes, the FBI was able to unlock Crook's phone and start sifting through its contents. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's a good thing, right? They caught the bad guy. And you wouldn't be wrong. In this case, the technology was used to investigate a serious crime. But here's where things get complicated. The same tools that can be used to crack a criminal's phone can potentially be used on anyone's device. And that's where the debate over privacy versus security comes into play. On one side, we have law enforcement agencies arguing that they need these tools to solve crimes and protect national security. On the other, we have privacy advocates warning that these capabilities could be abused, leading to unwarranted surveillance and violations of civil liberties. It's a debate that's been raging for years, and it's only getting more intense as our lives become increasingly digital. Remember the San Bernardino case back in 2015? When the FBI wanted Apple to create a backdoor into the iPhone of one of the shooters, Apple refused, arguing that creating such a tool would compromise the security of all iPhones. The FBI eventually found another way in, but the case highlighted the ongoing tension between tech companies and law enforcement. In fact, over 6,900 public safety agencies and enterprises in more than 100 countries rely on Cellebrite's tools. Cellebrite's influence in the digital forensics world is substantial. Listed on the Nasdaq stock market, the company reported annual recurring revenue of $89.6 million for the first quarter of 2024, and has worked on over 5 million cases. About 20% of its public sector work involves federal customers, and they're aiming to expand this further. However, Cellebrite's success hasn't come without controversy. Privacy advocates have criticized the company, arguing that their technology constitutes unethical hacking and has been misused by foreign governments to target activists. In response to these concerns, Cellebrite informed federal regulators in 2021 that it had ceased operations in certain regions, including China and Hong Kong, citing human rights concerns. The company maintains that its software is used exclusively to unlock seized phones in legally sanctioned cases and is never used for surveillance. So, what did the FBI find when they finally got into Crook's phone? Well, the details are still emerging, but early reports suggest that they didn't immediately find a clear motive for the assassination attempt. They did, however, uncover some interesting details about Crook's online activities. It turns out that Crooks had been searching for information on a wide range of topics. He had looked up images and public appearances of high-profile political figures, including both Trump and current President Biden. He'd searched for information about the Democratic National Convention, but perhaps most disturbingly, he'd also been looking into topics related to chronic depression and past mass shootings, including the Oxford High School shooting. This digital trail paints a complex picture of a troubled individual, but it doesn't provide the clear-cut answers that investigators were hoping for. The FBI's access to all this information, Crook's search history, private messages, and location data, raises some serious questions. Questions that we all need to ask ourselves. Because at the end of the day, the story of how they hacked the Trump shooter's phone isn't just about Thomas Matthew Crooks, it's about all of us. It's about the balance between security and privacy in the digital age, and it's a conversation that we can't afford to ignore. Do you think law enforcement should be able to break into any device? Why or why not? Share your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.